Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the YouTube show and podcast, None of Our Businesses, where us as accountants talk about the latest in business, news, world events, all from accountants' perspectives, of course. And not just one accountant, but today with us, three accountants. I've got Jack DiMatteo.
Hello, everyone.
Charlie Zygmunt.
Thanks for joining.
And myself, Ty Carr. And what are we going to talk about today? Well, what are we doing with the 5.2 trillion stimulus wearing off? What are we going to do about that? Dow Jones, as of this recording, has had the worst day closing of 2021. And the useless degree. Well, there's probably more than one, but we're going to talk about one in particular here. Some jobs not coming back, and TurboTax, Intuit opts out of IRS pre-file program. What do we think about that? All right, guys, great to have you with us as always. And I would tell our audience, if you've got thoughts about things we should talk about or comments or suggestions for us, or just want to say anything to us, throw it in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a rating, whether it's a podcast or on YouTube, thumbs up, likes, all that good stuff. And yeah, let's kick this off today with Jack.
What happens to the economy when the $5.2 trillion of stimulus money wears off? Well, I think that's an interesting question. My take would probably be there'll probably be more stimulus that'll get pumped into the economy because, you know, as I see it, as that article's written, and it's about 2 weeks old already, I mean, this was prior to, you know, passing an infrastructure stimulus that they've been talking about. But, you know, I'd make the argument if you go back to 2000, I'd go all the way back to 2008, because I think that's probably the last time that the economy was functioning along without some kind of artificial stimulation. I mean, we've had very, very low interest rates since 2008. I think, you know, the way the Trump administration, they tried to do a couple interest rate hikes and the economy squawked at that. And then so did the stock market, and they quickly reduced those. And then COVID came along, and now they've reduced interest rates back to where, you know, they don't plan on an increase until late 2022 or 2023. And even when they announced that they're not going to raise rates for 2 years, I think it was a bad day for the stock market. They didn't like that, you know, 2 years in the future. So, you know, I would make the argument that it'll be nothing, because I think I think this environment of pushing stimulus into the economy is, you know, something that's here to stay. I guess the answer that I don't have is, what happens when we finally get to the point when there's just going to be no more, you know, we're going to be in such a way where stimulus won't even help the economy, or we aren't able to keep stimulating the economy. I mean, you know, that bill comes due. That's what really kind of worries me about what's going to happen with the economy. Kind of want to get your guys' take on it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because before the stimulus, there was this idea that's been kind of talked about in the last, well, I only really heard about it, talked about, and really put thought into it in the last 5 years or so. It probably is an idea that's been around longer than that, and I just wasn't in the know, but that you've heard that term of systematic unemployment and creating kind of a minimum benefit or a guaranteed wage or some kind of minimum payment to citizens or whatever to cover their basic needs, under the theory that that the economy is advanced to the point that not every person can or would need to be employed, and that because that's not practical, then there has to be kind of a minimum guaranteed income, I think that's what it's called. And so I think what's interesting about this question is, you know, was the stimulus kind of an undercover first round of this idea of a guaranteed income, and could we see kind of guaranteed income trickle into our way of doing things through kind of repeated stimuli that you know, until as a society we accept that idea if it's working or not, you know. And I guess to your question, Jack, you know, will it even work, you know, or does, you know, we don't know what the outcome of doing something like that is because it hasn't been done at that kind of scale before. So yeah, I am I don't have an opinion yet. I would say I'm cautious about it, but to this question of, what do you do after the stimulus wears off, or will there continue to be just more stimulus? I think if you just have more stimulus, it feels to me like we're trickling into a guaranteed income philosophy, essentially.
Yeah, no, I think you've got it right. I think your choice to use the word trickle was maybe not the best for this issue. Kind of brings in trickle down economics and all the bad feelings associated with that. But yeah, universal basic income is one of those things that I think is going to catch on more as we're starting to see this continue to take hold of everything. And I mean, anytime we do stimulus, we're looking at lesser of two evils of what is the damage happening now to the economy versus how much of a problem are we building for ourselves down the road by like Jack said, by building up a debt ball that we can't really handle. And so I kind of think in general, if we get to the point as a society where we get beyond certain jobs and we automate past them, and that then frees people up to either do other jobs or to be cared for by the system through universal basic income, I think that sounds strange, but it doesn't seem like it would necessarily be a bad thing, because to me, that's like the extension of just, advancing as a society. I mean, if we can do things better to where we don't need that level of man hours, that could be a good thing as long as we can balance that with kind of the needs of everybody. And so, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And I think we're kind of in historic times when it comes to that issue. But I could see it being a good thing if we can strike that right balance between them.
It's interesting, Ty. You raise an interesting point, because that if you're being completely honest, the fact that this stimulus is not just touching one sector or one section of the economy or the population in general. It's spread throughout everything. Everybody, every facet of this economy at every income level, corporate, individual, everybody has been getting propped up by some form of stimulus. So to your point, we're almost already propping everybody up to one extent or another. Maybe that's the long game. You're right that we're going to guarantee a certain minimum earnings for everybody in this society, or propping up some of these jobs and that. But that's the funny thing about stimulus. It almost removes the stigma of, wow, it's welfare. Well, yeah, it's welfare for pretty much corporations, the poor, the middle class. Everybody is being the beneficiary of a lot of this stimulus. And I think as they do that, it starts removing a lot of those stigmas, and it gets far more wider acceptance throughout society. Charlie, you got an article for us this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you've got is a very kind of upbeat, positive article. I would like to just take it back down a notch to an article I found in NBC News called "The Dow Jones Closes Down More Than 700 Points in the Worst Day of 2021." And so this is a couple of days old at this point, but I think the trend is pretty much still there. It looks like the US is averaging 30,000 new cases a day, which is up from a 7-day average of around 11,000 in terms of coronavirus. And so, there's all this fear of this new Delta variant that's spreading and whatnot. A bunch of stocks that would have, directly benefited from swift reopening of the economy are now leading the losses because it feels like things are going to slow down in reopening. I'm sure you guys know, but we had oil prices fall on like the fear of slowing growth. And so, yeah, just a lot of different kind of harbingers of economic sentiment in that Dow Jones Industrial Average. But I guess I just wanted to open it up as kind of a general thought. We're here seeing things starting to reopen. And so on the one hand, it does feel very hopeful, but then we hit this bump in the road. And so I guess I want to get your guys' take on just the current state of the economy, or your opinions on kind of how our return to, back to normal is going to go. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I've been waiting to see where the market would go to. And I've been just sitting on cash myself because I didn't know what to do. And maybe that was silly for the last 6 months, because maybe I would have done well if I just put money into the markets. But I've been just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen when things were going to normalize. So I'm watching this as it's happening right now very intently to ask the question of, is this now the time to go ahead and invest, to get out of cash and put it in investments, because things are now come back to kind of a reasonable point before it hits another spike of growth or whatever, right? So Yeah, I mean, they say you shouldn't do that, right? You shouldn't like follow the market and wait for the dip to invest, but that's kind of, I guess, what I've been doing. So yeah, I'm following this very closely this week.
Yeah, it's interesting. Here we go again. We've seen this pattern so many times since they started this stimulus. There's no other place to go, and people flock back to the stock market. So that was on Monday, the hideous 700-point drop, but I think we've got it back and then some. And I believe today, at one point today, I think the NASDAQ made a new high and the S&P 500 made a new high. So here we are again. But here's kind of my take. I think there's 1 month out of the year that there's always a drop at some point. Sometimes it's shallow, sometimes it's more severe, and that's generally August. So I'm going to start rotating a little bit into some shorts. And see if I can get a little bit of a drop in August, and I'll let it go, and then I'll flip. After we get out of that, it seems like August and September, they're just tough months for the stock market, and everybody goes back to sleep, and we get that melt up going into the holidays. But it's interesting. But like we've seen this pattern repeated many times. The world was coming to an end. 3 days ago, big drops in the stock market. The COVID cases were going up. Oil was dropping, but it's gone up every day since Monday. So I guess the world isn't coming to an end after all. I've got another article on here that switching gears a little bit, and it would be financially hobbled for life. The elite master's degree programs that just don't pay off. And in the article, they do a study on, specific MBA programs. That some of them are just kind of ludicrous at the outset. And why would you expect them to pay off? But I would even take this a step further where, a lot of times people go and they'll get an MBA that they don't really necessarily need. Now I've heard, in corporate America, they almost need to justify this as they create salary grades and pay grades. All of a sudden, if they want a grade to pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 higher, well, geez, that's going to require a master's degree. So, a lot of people are out there chasing these degrees because, as you translate it to the corporate world, you're going to need that degree to perhaps maybe get a promotion, and it might be worth some money. But I think to a large, unless you're going to be really in that corporate structure, I think you got to take a long, hard look at this. And a lot of us, you don't necessarily know what's in the cards for you. You might embark on that MBA going, I'm going to have a corporate career, and decide, hey, I'm going to open my own business, or I'm going to work for a smaller company where maybe the value isn't placed on that MBA. So, with what a lot of these degrees cost, obviously it's easy to pick on some of the MBA programs that, I can't really see you getting a payback for that one. But I would even say some of the more mainstream ones. I've seen it with people in business that have gone out and gotten MBAs, and I'm really not sure that they recouped it or saw the value in the time commitment and the amount of money that it took. Kind of want to see what you guys think of the whole master's degree program status these days.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I see in the workforce all the time. People with masters who maybe aren't where they want to be, or having trouble getting the jobs that they kind of had in mind when they got it. I do think it's a big decision of what you want to do. You have to pick, if you're going to get an MBA, you have to really have that trajectory of where it's required. This is just kind of anecdotal, but I have seen business owners that I've worked with who have actually had kind of, I don't want to say negative sentiments towards the MBA, but weren't as impressed by the MBA as a lot of people otherwise would be, or as they are when they're kind of signing up for the debt associated with it. And so I think that more and more, I'm just seeing that owners are looking for proven skills, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's through some kind of portfolio or project that you've put together that you can demonstrate, or, whatever else it happens to be. Now, I think a lot of that comes from my experience of just being in a place where an MBA wasn't a requirement. So I, ran into people with that sentiment. And I think for everybody who has that opinion, there's somebody else who's the opposite on that. But for me, that's what I've seen. I've never been tempted to go back for an MBA, and I just don't see myself doing it. I think you just have to use the degree that you picked. I think more important than choosing the MBA is just choosing a degree in a field that you plan to use it, because we can all agree that it's not going to help if you get a schooling in one topic and then work in another. So that's my take.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think generally a graduate degree in any particular discipline, it should be motivated by its necessity for whatever the profession is that you're in for the most part. And so some professions require graduate degrees and some don't. Some professions or some jobs having a graduate degree or having an MBA culturally maybe helps you. And so I often got this question when I was on the faculty, the accounting faculty at Portland State for many years. I often got this question, in term from students or from colleagues or people even outside of the school who knew about my background, what I did, and said, well, would you recommend that I get an MBA? And sometimes, because we're in accounting, often the question would be, would you recommend that I get an MBA, or should I spend time and money on getting credentialed as a CPA? And so my answer to this is that, I see kind of three scenarios where an MBA is useful. I don't believe it's useful necessarily in the abstract. It's pretty rare that an MBA is useful in landing you a new job, landing you a job where you are doing a job search across the public. It's pretty rare that the MBA helps with that specifically. But, some of the scenarios where an MBA helps is, and what I would tell people, like on the question of if you're doing something in accounting or finance and you're asking, should I get credentialed as a CPA? Should I get credentialed as a CMA? Should I get credentialed as a certified financial analyst, a CFA? Or should I get my MBA? Or should I do my MBA and those things? My answer to that is, if you're working inside a company, whether it's a large public company or even a small private company, and you're working with other people, there's a culture there, right? So if you're working in a corporate environment in a finance or accounting department, the answer to what you should get is to look up the ladder and see what the other people in your department have. So if if you're working in a corporate, let's say you're a staff accountant starting your career and you're working or you're a financial analyst in a company, and you're looking up at the controller and the CFO and the VP of finance and some of these different kinds of more executive roles in accounting and finance, and all of those people have MBAs, and your plan is to stay with that company or a similar company in a similar industry, then you probably should get an MBA. That would make sense, right? If you're looking at those people and you find that some of them have MBAs, but some of them have CPAs, then maybe that's better, that you need to get your CPA license, right? What we see usually, like if it's accounting specific, what we often see, or finance specific, what we often see in very large companies is it depends on the group. Like if you're in a controllership group, then being a CPA is most important. If you are in a financial analyst group, then the MBA, planning financial analyst, some of those more executive roles, then you might see that more of those folks have MBAs than have CPAs. And some of them may also have CFAs. And so I mean, I think the context of what do the mentors, the leaders, the people who are sitting in the positions that you want to have, what does their background actually look like? I think that would give you some indication of what you want to do. But I would say, to be asking to know to be at that point, you already have a job with that company. You're already working there. You've already established relationships. You're starting to ask, right? So this is not a thing for somebody who doesn't even have a job yet. Like if you're just getting out of school with an undergraduate degree and then saying, should I get an MBA before I go to work? I'd say probably not, because you don't know whether you need that MBA or a CPA or a CFA or whatever it is you might need until you actually are working. And you're working in a company and you see what the culture there seems to want to have, right? So why do, getting it just at the onset to look for a job is probably not as valuable, in my opinion, in most cases. The other scenario, there's a couple other scenarios where MBAs are helpful. They're narrow in their application, right? In the sense that another scenario would be, you are an engineer or a scientist of some sort, you're getting into business, or maybe you're already working in business. And so you might find that in order to move up in your career, because you don't have any other formal business training, that getting an MBA to go along with your engineering degree, or an MBA to go along with your biochemistry degree or whatever, is helpful. right? And so that makes sense. But again, it seems to me that you don't want to come straight out of engineering school or come out of school as a chemistry major and then turn around and get an MBA right away. Go get a job somewhere where they hire chemistry majors and engineers, and then see, do the higher ups in that company also have MBAs? Often that's the case because, you're trained as a chemist or you're trained as an engineer, but some of that more kind of basic, broad business knowledge is helpful. And so the company often wants those folks to have MBAs to kind of move into the leadership ranks. And so fair enough, but go get on that track first and then decide to get the MBA is what I would say about that. The only place where sometimes getting the MBA without necessarily being in a company or having a track, although this is somewhat chicken and egg, is helpful is if you're doing a top tier MBA program, right? So a lot of times when people are talking about this, it's like, well, is an MBA helpful to getting a job? Well, an MBA at the top schools in the country, like Stanford, Harvard, the Thunderbird, places like that. These are places where the connections you make will make your life and will make your career. The people who come out of those programs are landing six-figure jobs, many with investment banks right out of the gate, right? They make connections for life that set them up for being, if they become entrepreneurial, they've got connections that allow them to raise money, because their buddies are the same ones that end up in the PE firms and the VC firms and things of that nature. So yeah, the adage of who you know is important or more important than what you know is true, but only applicable in a narrow band. It's like there's this elite group of folks that if you're in that elite group, who you know can matter more than anything. And so if you're able to do that, if that's what you're talking about is, should I get a Harvard MBA? Yes, all day long. If you have the ability and the route to get your Harvard MBA today, go do it, because forget the value of what you would learn there, which I think you probably would learn a lot, but forget that. Simply the connections alone will set you up for the rest of your life and your career. That is how the world works, in that sense. But everywhere else, the connections could be good and fair and all that, but are unlikely to be so important that I would say that, right? But those connections are super important. But I said it's a chicken and egg question, because the truth is, top tier MBA programs generally want you to have work experience before they admit you. So, the idea that you come out of undergraduate school and then jump straight into an MBA at, the Chicago School of Finance or the Thunderbird or, other Stanford, these top tier schools is unusual. Usually you have a great undergraduate record, but you also have great work experience. And it's those two things combined that gets you admission to a top tier MBA school. So when people talk about MBAs, they're often not talking about that. They're not talking about an MBA at one of these top tier schools. They're talking about kind of the MBA in the broad sense that you can get at, many, many schools. And hey, I taught at Portland State University, and I would say that an MBA there or many other state-run universities is a great education. I mean, you are learning good things, particularly if you don't have any other kind of business background, right? But I would struggle to say that it provides the kind of connections that I was talking about. So yeah, that's my take on it, is that context is everything in this question.
You hit on a fantastic point. I mean, obviously, and the first one that comes to mind is teaching. If you don't have at least a master's, you need not apply. So I could see staying in and doing that. But you raise a real good point too. If you really don't even know if that's going to be, if you get out, you have your undergrad and you're starting in a finance department or general business administration or sales or whatever, you don't even know if that's going to be the profession you're going to stay in. And the other thing is if you go into one of these big companies, they will, a lot of them have tuition assistants. So you're already, been busting it for 4 years. Let them take some of the load off. Lastly, what I would say about that, Ty, is you're absolutely right. Once they've tapped you on the shoulder and identified you as somebody who they want to invest in, they will handpick you to get you into the right, whatever they deem as those right MBA programs. And they will, give you the time that required to complete those MBA programs. So, that's some excellent advice if you're going for a general business degree, that doesn't require you having a master's to start right off. Go out, get some experience and kind of get the lay of the land. Look before you leap, as they say. How about you, Charlie? You got another article we can leap right into?
Yeah, I do. So if before you go out and get your MBA, you might want to take a peek at this article here. In the Wall Street Journal, it says that many jobs lost during the pandemic just aren't coming back. So I'm not trying to be doom and gloom here again, but basically companies are seeing automation and other labor saving steps as a way to kind of emerge from this health crisis with a smaller workforce. The article gives out some numbers that output has nearly recovered to pre-pandemic levels in the first quarter. So output was down about 0.5%, and they're using the term output in a pretty broad sense. So I don't know exactly what they're measuring there, but in general, they're trying to put a finger on total output. But so while we had a small drop there, we had a 4.3% drop in the number of hours that was used to get to that outcome. So even though we had this drop in hours, the drop in actual output was not as drastic as that drop in hours. And so, job openings are at a record high, which gives the impression that everybody's hiring, but so many of these businesses are not actually filling these roles, or they're looking for ways to kind of do things differently. And so, whenever we've talked about this kind of ad nauseum on this podcast before, but, whenever demand falls, it's a good time to kind of retool everything and to think about new ways to do things. And so we're always looking at this from the business perspective, but I wanted to kind of turn that on its head and say, so if you're a person who's listening to this podcast and who's concerned about this change, or about your job or your field not coming back, what advice would you guys give to people who feel that way, who are in that situation and who are worried that they may not have a job to come back to once we're fully back to normal?
Well, I mean, it seems like now's the time, if you feel like that's even possible, you just know the person, that how people are, right? There's the people who think that might be possible, but they're kind of going to sit on their hands and kind of hem and haw about it and worry about whether it's going to happen or not. And kind of, they're just going to kind of talk every day about their fears of the job not coming back, but not really do anything about it until like the final, until it's finally there and clear that it's not coming back. And then, and then they're going to kind of moan about, oh, well, look at what happened to me, kind of thing. I would propose that if you're even thinking it's at all possible, even remotely possible, then you already know something in the back of your head about the job and the role that you have. You already kind of have a sense of that this is the kind of thing that could be automated. This is the kind of thing that doesn't necessarily, need you to be doing it in that way, and that it's at risk. And so even if it does come back, like even if this isn't what kills that job, the fact that you have even the remote concern about that suggests that it could be, something else in the future could be what it is that kills that as a job or a role for you or anyone else. And so my advice would be simple, is that if you even remotely have that as a possible thought, you should be thinking about how you can shift or transition into something else. Don't wait to find out for sure, and if you really are if you want to play it safe, fair enough though. I mean, if you're the kind of person who can kind of be kind of relaxed on most things, and it doesn't bother you to wait till the last minute to find out that for sure there's not a job there, and then you'll just kind of figure it out from there. And, you're an easygoing guy, kind of a la the Big Lebowski kind of easygoing, then, I worship you. That's great. I worship those who can be that kind of relaxed. So go for it. Be that relaxed. But for me, yeah, I mean, I can't stand being involved in something I already know doesn't have a long-term future. So I guess what I'm saying about that is even if this is not the final straw or the nail in the coffin for your particular role, the fact that it might even be on the rocks tells you something in the future could be the final straw or the nail in the coffin. So deal with it now. Don't wait.
It was interesting. Earlier in the day, I was on another panel discussion, for lack of a better way to describe it. But we were talking of the one did quite a bit of work with manufacturers, and we keep hearing this. Everybody keeps expecting this bow to break, and all of a sudden, all these different industries that have been short of workers, these people are going to magically show up. And I guess they're not going to. I think the machine shop that can't find people, 6 months from now still isn't going to be able to find people. I have, automotive repair shops that can't find mechanics. I have accounting firms that can't find somebody with 3 to 5 years of experience. Senior accounting managers. I'm like, I don't even really deal with those people on a daily basis. Let me try my daughter. She's at EY. She's the right age group. Maybe she can help you and help find somebody. But I don't think those people are going to come back. And kind of, what this one person's take was on it. And I can see that the fact that these people, there aren't people, I think companies are starting to adjust. Because the adage is that I can't grow if I don't have the people. And they're like, well, wait a minute. I'm not going to wait around for that or use that as an excuse. And they're starting to figure out ways to do more with less. So maybe you had 3 people running a machine. I mean, you start automating. You get one person that can run 3 machines. They're going to find a way to automate and increase productivity with or without those people. And I'm just of the opinion, I don't think that there's this whole workforce that's sitting there just waiting for something magical to happen, and they're going to flood the market. And all of a sudden, everybody knows about the McDonald's that shuts down at 7 o'clock because they can't find staff to work till close, or they shut down their lobby early because they don't have enough staff to cover those. I don't think those things are going away or going to change. I think what you're going to see is businesses are going to adapt to the fact that there's fewer people and they've got to find a way to automate, find some kind of alternative to keep productivity and growth going.
I just want to say 100% on that. I think you hit on exactly kind of this thought that I had in my head. It's like labor and capital right now are playing this big game of chicken, but the labor side of it it's not like it's organized, right? It's just, so there's no mastermind that's sitting here organizing labor and saying, hey, don't go back to work because they're not paying you enough. What's going, or they're working you too hard. What's happening, and I think about this in the restaurant context, as you brought up, because I can, I read about it and I can also see it when I go out to restaurants. I can see that the restaurants don't have enough serving staff. And so it does feel like labor's just kind of holding out for better terms. Right. But that's not what's going to happen. To your point, what's going to happen is that by holding out like that, it would be, if it was a strategy, it would be a terrible strategy, because it's just going to cause all the companies to change how they provide service and change how things work so that they don't need the labor to do it. Right. And then, but the unfortunate fact of this is there is no mastermind to the labor side of the strategy. It is just the simple fact that, people they're not needing money bad enough to go to work right now. And so, and that's leading to this issue. So it's ironic, we were talking about the stimulus earlier, but this light bulb just came on to me, the irony involved here, right? Because the stimulus is designed to help the people, right? And in fact, by keeping people out of the workforce to some extent, causing companies to figure out how to do more without the people are probably not going to like that result. is my
No, that's it. I mean, we just forced their hand by giving people the ability to not work. That forced employers to find other ways. And so we really we basically set the pieces down for that to happen. And now here it is happening. And so, yeah.
It's like the concept of systematic unemployment could actually end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, that we're actually creating it by.
See, and they must be getting the money from somewhere. Like I say, I'm a simple guy, and I've worked all kinds of crappy jobs. It was a simple thing. If I wanted to pay rent and eat and make a car payment, I had to work. I had to do something, whether I liked the job or not. It had to be done. So they're getting the money from somewhere, and you're right. I think at some point they could be in for a very rude awakening. But hey, switching gears a little bit. Intuit, TurboTax, the big one, has pulled out of the free file program with the IRS. So, I mean, right off the bat, I look at an article like this, and it's, if you want somebody to comply, i.e. file electronically, why is there why is this a free service for everybody, regardless of the program they use, regardless of the methodology? I would think if you would want 100% compliance, and I think it breaks on income guidelines, but to me it's kind of a misnomer. If you want everybody to file electronically, I would just think it would be free regardless of whatever source or software maker you use or whatever venue you want to do. If you go and you post it on their site, I would just think this should be free across the board if you want to have people filing electronically. So obviously, I think TurboTax is the big kid on the block. So I think this kind of leaves a hole in the whole program for driving that. You guys seem a little bit closer to the tax side than I am. Wanted to see what you guys thought of this.
Well, I'm sure Ty has a lot to say about this, so I'll just jump in first and throw in my opinions instead. But, on the one hand, I'm with you 100%. I mean, if they want everybody to file for electronically, then they should make a free option and that should be available. Now, on the flip side, I want to play devil's advocate because I think if that minimum is met, then there exists a potential for a service outside of that, which is maybe better. And if somebody wants to go pay TurboTax to do that service and what they feel is better, I'm going to use quotes here, than what the free option is, then I think that's totally valid. And I don't really blame Intuit for trying to focus in on that market because they're focused in on that service, being better than the free file tool. Now, I'm with you 100%. Free file tool needs to be there, needs to be encouraged, needs to be easy for that to even make sense. But I don't have a problem with the free file being there and then another option that maybe costs more, but to someone else might be better. And then it just becomes up to the consumer to decide what that's worth. Is that value that he thinks he's getting worth what he's paying? And, so I don't know, that's my take on it. What do you think, Ty?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Intuit cares. I mean, they're just very big. And so they just, they're at this point, they're just playing averages. I'm a little bit jaded right now because I've had issues trying to get QuickBooks to fire up a QBO account for me, and our system not working. And they say, oh, there's something wrong with the programming and the engineering backend, and they haven't been able to deal with it for like a week or more. Probably it's been a problem longer than that, and I just didn't know because I don't fire up new accounts that often. But yeah, the feeling I got in working with them on that so far is that they don't. Yeah, they kind of don't care that they can't serve me because they're serving they're serving en masse so much that they're to the point where the individual consumer doesn't really matter for them. That's what happens when you have market domination and and large companies, right? So yeah, I don't think TurboTax dominates the market, and I don't think they have any. I don't think they have any reason to play along voluntarily with any kind of particular program. Like, I think it's, as you said, I think the onus would be on the IRS to really push or incentivize companies that have that market presence if they believe that, if this is something they believe is important for taxpayers, and then they need to get with the program and do something, partner with the companies like Intuit, because just waiting for Intuit to voluntarily want to partner with them, why would they?
No, absolutely. And it's just funny because I went through some of the debacles here in Ohio. And I just think when it comes to tax filing, you want a voluntary system. I think you need to put whatever tools in place to make it as easy as possible for all taxpayers to do those filings, whether it's at a state level, whether it's at the IRS level. And unfortunately, as probably you guys are aware, that's not always necessarily the case. Very inconsistent across the different platforms when you're filing these taxes. Some of them almost go out of their way to make it as difficult as possible. Ohio's very, very, very interesting. I mean, you go to download a PDF, and I used 2 different computers and 3 different browsers, and kept telling me I needed an update, and I had the latest version of everything. And then you call and you're on the phone for an hour. It's just, when it comes to tax filing, I think if you want a voluntary system, you really need to streamline and make things as easy and free, if you will, across the board for all your filers.
All right, everybody, this has been the None of Our Businesses YouTube show and podcast. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and tune in again next week for more business updates from an accountant's perspective. Also, check out our sister podcast, Profitless on Purpose, where they talk anything and everything relating to the nonprofit space. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Bye.